And next up, we have Trey Griffith from SparkSwap talking about not-so-atomic swaps.
Hey, so I'm Trey. I'm the founder of SparkSwap. A few weeks ago, we released a new desktop app called SparkSwap Desktop that allows you to buy Bitcoin with USD from your bank account instantly. And today I wanted to talk about atomic swaps on Lightning, and in some cases maybe things that aren't quite atomic swaps, but are really similar and have some really interesting properties, and we can build some really interesting things on them. To do that, I need to kind of revisit a concept that I think everyone in this room is pretty familiar with, which is HTLCs, hash time lock contracts. This is how money in the Lightning Network moves. So when you make a transaction in a channel, you're actually sending an HTLC to your counterparty. And the nice thing about this contract, it's as far as kind of like smart contracts go, it's pretty simple. The payer sends money to the payee, but the payee can't claim that money unless they reveal the pre-image to some pre-agreed hash. And if they don't reveal that pre-image within a given timeout, the payer gets that money back. So it's a pretty simple contract. And in the context of Lightning, the way this kind of happens is that the payee typically will create an invoice that includes the hash of a pre-image that they've created previously. They share that out of band with the payer. The payer then creates an HTLC to the payee, and the payee accepts the HTLC. Now, that's not the end of the story. There's kind of three different ways that this HTLC can be finalized. That it can either be settled by revealing the pre-image, it can be canceled, or it can be kind of that those two options can also happen on-chain. And the great thing about this happening in Lightning is that kind of the first two options of settling and canceling, as long as both channel counterparties are still cooperating, those can happen instantly. So you don't have to wait for a long kind of on-chain resolution. And there's some new features in some of the implementations, and in particular, L&D is the one that I'm most familiar with, through a feature called hold invoices. And as an application developer, you now have direct control into how these HTLCs get finalized. So you can plug into the life cycle of an invoice to make it settle if you want to, cancel if you want to, or cancel or settle after some other action that you want to take as an application. And this seems like a fairly simple contract, but what makes it so powerful is that you can link multiple transactions together into a single atomic transaction. So if you think about kind of multi-hop payments on Lightning, that's all they are. They're multiple HTLCs. These are independent transactions that are linked with the same hash. And so what that gives us is it allows the payer and the payee to go through some intermediary without having to trust the intermediary. The intermediary cannot take the funds from the payer unless they release the funds to the payee. And similarly, and this is just as important, the intermediary doesn't put themselves at risk. So there's no way that the intermediary can have the funds taken by the payee unless they're able to claim funds from the payer. So that's a really important aspect of the Lightning Network, is just how these transactions are linked together. But what I've been interested in kind of basically from the beginning of my involvement with Lightning is how you can link these transactions with other types of transactions, things that maybe aren't just other more hops on the Lightning Network. And I think that the kind of like most obvious example of this is something that Alex talked about this morning, which is submarine swaps, in this incarnation as Lightning Loop. And I think, looking at a lot of the talks here today, submarine swaps have gained a ton of, kind of mind share among developers as a really interesting way to enable new experiences. And for those of you that aren't familiar, a submarine swap is just a Lightning Network transaction, so an HTLC on one side, and an on-chain HTLC on the other side. So you can have a on-chain payment that is linked to an off-chain payment. And so, for example, in Fabrice's talk about Phoenix, this is how they present a unified balance to the user. If you make an on-chain payment, you can actually pay an off-chain invoice and vice versa. There's a few other applications that are doing interesting things with that as well. So I think that's a really powerful way for developers to kind of expand the experiences that are possible with the Lightning Network. Another example is cross-chain swaps on Lightning. So this is where SparkSwap started, was linking the Bitcoin Lightning Network to the Litecoin Lightning Network and enable trading between those two assets, basically instantly. There's some other interesting projects that are happening with that from Radar as well. So there's a ton of interesting applications here when you talk about linking these two types of transactions together. But I think I'm also interested in how we can link these transactions with things that are not just other blockchain transactions. So how do we link them to things that are happening in the real world? I think my favorite example of this is, again, from Alex Bosworth. It's this concept of guaranteed pizza, where you order pizza from a pizza shop, but you pay them with an HTLC that you control the pre-image for. So the pizza shop has this HTLC. They can guarantee that they're going to get paid, but they don't have the pre-image, so they can't collect payment yet. And it's not until they deliver the pizza to you that you give them the pre-image. They can then redeem the HTLC. They get paid. You get pizza. Everybody's happy. Now, if you heard Rusty's talk, this type of long-lived HTLC may be kind of frowned upon in the future. So I don't know that this particular application has a ton of legs, but if you think about something that's maybe a little bit more valuable than pizza, I think it makes a little bit more sense. What if this is a really valuable asset, something like diamonds, something like gold? You start to see how this type of physical transaction that is linked with an off-chain Lightning transaction could enable some really powerful applications. And when you start thinking about kind of linking to the real world, for me at least, I also think about linking to the traditional financial world. And if you revisit what an HTLC is, it's really an escrow. It's an escrow in which the only condition for cashing that escrow is the revelation of a pre-image. But if you think about the way that the Bitcoin blockchain and the Lightning Network handles these HTLCs, they're basically escrows without a trusted third party. But if you think about the fiat system, it's basically built entirely of trusted third parties. So the kind of equivalent in the fiat system for an HTLC is kind of this trusted third party escrow. They really operate in a very similar way, and because the fiat system is based completely on trusted and central third parties, you're not actually increasing the trust assumptions of that system by introducing this type of escrow. And so if you have this escrow that looks like a Lightning HTLC for USD that's administered by some trusted third party, and you have an HTLC on Lightning, you can have a single transaction where you exchange Bitcoin for USD without increasing the trust assumptions of each system. So each system is using kind of the security and trust assumptions that are already built in to have a single transaction where two parties can exchange Bitcoin and USD, pretty much instantly. And so that's what we built at SparkSwap. We built a way to buy Bitcoin on Lightning that uses this type of setup where you have a trusted third-party escrow provider. We worked with a partner who built a escrow system that looks just like an HTLC. It uses a SHA-256 hash to cache an escrow, and those escrows can be created and canceled programmatically. So they work a lot like an HTLC, but with obviously much worse trust assumptions. And so the result is that you have, we can trade with you as a user, and we can send you Bitcoin, and you only get the Bitcoin if we get the USD, and we only get the USD if you get the Bitcoin. I think more practically speaking for users, this means things like there's no refunds. The transactions either go through or they don't. There's no case where we are holding onto your USD, but you didn't get your Bitcoin. So to kind of show how this actually works in practice, there's a little video. This was a live demo on Tuesday of this week. Hopefully this video works. So I'm buying $5 of Bitcoin here over the Lightning Network. It's instantly available in my Lightning channel, and I can use that to feed some chickens on my favorite website, Pollo Feed. And those chickens are pretty happy that I was able to buy $5 of Bitcoin to feed them today or on Tuesday. So that's kind of how quick that this whole transaction can work. And the way that we do that is through this open source app called SparkSwap Desktop. And SparkSwap Desktop itself does not have a Lightning node. It connects with your existing Lightning node. So we have a tool to let you kind of scan on your machine for a Lightning node. And as soon as you're connected, this open source app that anyone is free to kind of audit and inspect, that app is what's responsible for kind of acting on your behalf on your side of this transaction. So when you deposit from your bank account, you can see that that deposit shows up pretty much instantly in your SparkSwap balance. And what's actually happening here under the hood is that you're sending funds via ACH to our escrow partner. So it's held in a US domiciled escrow account, and it's then available for use to create these programmatic SHA-256 fiat escrows. And when you buy, there's a couple of things to note about what happens here in the buy flow. So you put in the amount that you want to buy, and then you have to confirm it. And that's when the actual transaction kicks off. And what's actually happening under the hood here is you're first requesting a quote from SparkSwap, the server, versus SparkSwap, the app. And when we return that quote, the quote is going to be, okay, here's the amount of Bitcoin we'll sell you for $5. We'll also include with it a hash. And that hash is what you can use to create a transaction to get that Bitcoin. And when you accept that quote, you're actually doing two things. The first thing is you're adding what's called a hold invoice on LND. And this is, as I said, a new feature that allows this application to plug into the life cycle of the invoice. So now the application will have full control over what happens with this invoice. And then you tell the server, okay, I'd like to accept this quote. I would like to buy Bitcoin at this price. And at that point, the server sends you immediately a Lightning HTLC with the same pre-agreed hash. Now, because the SparkSwap app is plugged into LND's system and it knows to look out for this particular hash, the application then kind of takes control of that invoice and it holds onto it. It doesn't cache it right away. It doesn't reject it right away. It holds onto it and creates a fiat-based escrow with this escrow partner. And once that happens, we can settle the escrow. We can retrieve our USD. You can retrieve that pre-image and use that to settle the Lightning HTLC. And so this whole process where you are actually getting the Bitcoin using an HTLC from a fiat escrow, that whole thing happens in just a few seconds. So from a user perspective, it feels just like buying Bitcoin any other way, but we're able to move Bitcoin into your wallet over Lightning. You give us USD, and there's sort of minimal trust or not increased trust over the existing systems. I think this is an important concept for Bitcoiners. I think most people who look at our app and use our app are excited about it because it's a really easy way to get funds into a Lightning channel, and I think that's great. But what I'm excited about is, I think this settlement mechanism is very powerful. It's something that goes beyond what we in this room might be interested in as sort of like a science project or just some sort of technical achievement. And that's because of things like this. I don't know if anyone knows what this chart is. Anyone? Black Monday, 1987, the largest one-day crash in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. This is FTSE. And that crash was what inspired a bunch of central banks globally to get together and in 1992 recommend that securities settlement be transitioned to a delivery versus payment settlement mechanism. So in settlement for trading, you have the greatest risk in terms of settlement risk, because if one party doesn't deliver their half of the trade, you're out for the entire trade. It's not just the amount that the asset has moved in the time since you made the trade. The entire trade, you're done. And so delivery versus payment settlement allows financial institutions to reduce the risk that they take. because they only give up their side of the trade if they're receiving the other half of the trade. Now, this is pretty hard to operationalize, but this is something that central banks around the world decided this is the best way to reduce the risk and fragility in the system. And that's for a bunch of regulated, large, trusted institutions, to say nothing of kind of individuals like you and I. And so what this is at a kind of financial level is delivery versus payment settlement, where you have, both halves of the transaction are inextricably linked. But in our case, by using Lightning, we have a delivery versus payment settlement system that is real time. It happens in seconds. Most of what you're seeing there when it's spinning is things like network requests to set it up in the first place. And because we're using a system like Lightning, it's something that's available for anyone. It's not something that is only available to a select few institutions around the world. So I think that systems like this can reduce the risk and fragility of the financial system as a whole, while also opening up access to a much larger number of people. And so I think this is just the beginning. I think, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can connect these transactions together, but really I think submarine swaps, I think what we've built with a fiat escrow system, that's really just two applications of what could be many more applications of taking Lightning transactions and linking them to other transactions. And so I'm really excited to see what other people in this room hopefully build. That's maybe a little bit more exciting than guaranteed pizza. But I'm really excited about this. And if you do want to kind of try out a state-of-the-art settlement system, I'd love if you downloaded SparkSwap Desktop, or if you just want an easy way to get Bitcoin in your Lightning channel with USD from your bank account. It's pretty good for that too. And if you are interested, let me know. We have a kind of a promo code that I can give you for some nice benefits. So that's all I have. I have a few minutes for questions.
Hi, thank you for your talk. Speaking of the pizza example, I still don't quite understand, if I want to buy pizza from you, how can you be sure that the random thing that I gave you is the hash of some preimage that I know? What if you deliver pizza to me, but this turns out to be just random garbage?
Yeah, it's possible, but at that point, I can verify that you have the preimage before I give you the pizza. So you can troll me, you can make a fake pizza delivery phone call, but the risk is not that, in the case of pizza where it's kind of like, the pizza's going to go bad in 5 minutes, so maybe pizza is a bad example for this, but for an asset like that has, like diamonds, that has a little more staying power, as long as I get to keep the diamonds, maybe I lose a little bit on that trade because maybe you were willing to pay a higher price than other people, but I don't lose the diamonds. So I can guarantee that the only way that you're getting the diamonds from me is if I get the payment from you. And what's really interesting too about kind of that preimage structure is I can validate that the preimage matches the hash without being online. I can just do that by hashing the preimage you give me, and then I can take it back later and cache that HTLC.
I suppose a system like this, I really like it, but I suppose it cannot be fully decentralized. So I would like to know what kind of servers or service providers are involved and what are they doing in the process?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so this is not a decentralized system. This is what I would call a non-custodial system. So, we really believe in non-custodial wallets. I think it's great that there are, a lot of exchanges that are thinking about integrating Lightning and other custodial services, but we really want to enable kind of this non-custodial use case where you hold the Bitcoins in your wallet and we kind of minimize the trust in the system. That said, when you're trading against SparkSwap, the entity. So our server is the one that you're communicating with to get quotes and to actually execute trades. And then we also integrate with other service providers to help us do banking integration, our payment processing partner, et cetera. So there's a few other services that we're connected to make that happen, but fundamentally you're trading with us. Anyone else? Great. Well, thank you so much.